Transition, the process of change from one condition to another.
We are now at a new crossroad where change is evident once again.
What does not serve us must transform us anew.
Returning to our original state of oneness and true nature of that which created who we truly are.
Confusion was the way of the past. Enlightenment is the way of the now and future, shedding away the layers of deceit.
We now bring you the transformation of the two who started as one. Our fearless planet never stands still.
Earth has been in a process of transition, and we are not exempt from this remarkable ongoing reality.
Well, good evening and welcome to Transition Radio Show's Real Talk with the Cummings. My name is Mark Angelo.
And I'm Lena Ariel, and we just wanted to welcome you to our show this evening. We have a wonderful guest. You guys go back quite a ways, right?
We do, and she's been on the show before. Her name is Jessica Lamb. Jessica is an ally. Let me go ahead and show this picture here so people, while we're reading the bio. She is an ally and advocate for gay, lesbian, and transgender issues, and has appeared nationally on television programs such as Larry King Live, The Ricki LakeShow, Don Francisco Presenta, Maria Elvira Live, seven Dias. I think we were on that show together. Despierta America, and many other locally televised programs and newscasts.
She has been and continues to speak at many universities and high schools, engaging students and educators through workshops, lectures, stories, and is also a published children's book author. Additionally, she has facilitated transgender sensitivity trainings for Best Buy and AMC movie theaters, among other venues and offices.
She currently serves as the Vice President for the International Transgender Certification Board, ITCA, and she's the owner of Jessie Lamb Enterprises Incorporated, providing services and music, entertainment, and education. And now welcome to our show, our friend, Jessica.
Hi.
Hey, we go a long way. You and
Mark and I, we definitely go way back, like probably into the almost like the early turn of the century.
yes, very much so. And we did a couple of shows together.
We did, yes.
Yeah.
Siete Dias is one that we did together. Yeah, for sure. You may have been on Don Francisco with me. I don't remember, but yeah, we've done a couple Spanish shows together.
Yeah.
And we both know Dr. Ana Gloria Mora, who's a good friend of mine too. So
yeah, Ana Gloria, very good friend, and great educator as well.
For sure, she is. Yeah.
So we're gonna catch up a little bit for those who haven't watched past interviews. We always like to go back to the beginning, and so that people get a feel of how we as transsexuals come to be and what's our family life like, and what actually created this inner need of just living our lives the best way we can by transitioning and being our real authentic self, which most people don't believe that we are. They think we're being something we're not. So take us back to your childhood, Jessica. How did you relate to other kids while you were in school? What was it that made you realize that you were different?
Well, what made me feel different was the fact that something internally was telling me something other, right? So I always feel that we're always in the process of becoming. That's part of our life's journey. We're becoming something. And during different parts of our life, we're becoming whatever. I grew up in a Cuban family. And of course, in a Cuban family back in the early 70s, 80s, we had very sort of stereotypical ways of dealing with gender. And so boys don't cry, girls help mom in the kitchen, those kind of stereotypes. And being the firstborn son of Cuban parents, of course, there was much expected of me as a boy. I had to be the responsible one at home. So the messaging was always boy, 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 my little boy, and you need to be responsible. And, but internally there was this thing that was like, I describe it like a movie reel, right? So when you're watching a movie, you're seeing something, and this movie was like on auto loop going, but you're a girl, but you're a girl, but you're a girl. And I'd look at my body and I'll be like, this is not my body. So there was this sort of internal reel going, telling me that something was different. Not that my mom and dad ever put that idea in my head. Not that I was watching TV programs that put that idea, because the words didn't even exist. There was 2 words in the 1970s that described people from our community. That was either you were a transsexual or you were a transvestite, right? So, and then of course there was drag queens, but we didn't talk about drag queens as being part of this community because they were part of the gay community. So they were really gay men dressed as women. So it wasn't really a gender identity thing. So transsexual, transvestite. And I learned those terms watching Merv Griffin on TV after school one day when I was about 8 years old, because I saw some women on that panel that were born men and became women. I'm like, oh my God, this is fascinating. My make-believe games always growing up, I pretended to play girl parts. So I would do this with my brother. Sometimes I create like fantastical machines, and I made up a word, fantastical. You know, we make up all these machines, and in those machines, it would transform me into a girl. I wanted to shave my legs. I want to do all the things that girls do, but also knowing at the same time it was not okay, because that's not how I was raised. And there were no role models for me out there to know that until Merv Griffin pointed me in that direction. And so I decided at the age of 8 or 9 to investigate that. Now, of course, back then we didn't have the internet where I could just type it in and say, this is how I feel. Can you tell me who I am? Kind of a thing, right? Because we're all in this process of figuring out who we are, who I am, right? That who I am question, no matter where in the world you were born, that is just a basic existential question. And so, of course, I was questioning that. But here in the back of my mind, that little movie reel, I'm a girl, but I can't communicate this, right? So not that I played with dolls. I did. They were called action figures. So I had male role models that I loved, Fonzie and Captain Kirk and Superman and Spider-Man, all these characters. But there was something about Linda Carter on TV when she would become this glamazon princess that I like to be that too. You know, I wish I could turn, and become, Wonder Woman. So those are all private fantasies. And of course, becoming a teenager, and those thoughts are still there. I wanted to grow my hair long. I wasn't allowed to do that because that's not how little Cuban boys are supposed to look. My mom would literally have to tie me to a barber's chair to cut my hair. They would have to literally with belts strap me. I'll never forget that. Just tears. I don't want to cut my hair, and just struggling in restraints, and they didn't want me to move because the guy didn't want to cut my head with scissors. So they had to hold me, and it took me going to my mom's beauty salon to get my hair cut with her people, because there were lots of women in there and it wasn't boys. And so I would go in there and I'd let them, and always I'd tell them, please leave it a little long for me, kind of. So, but these are the things that I was growing up in and struggling with, because all this messaging was coming my way, but it just wasn't taking. So of course, becoming a teenager, I learned to hide it better, so I would, in the middle of the night, because who doesn't do things in the middle of the night you don't want your parents knowing, right? All of us on this planet have woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do whatever we want to do without letting our parents knowing what we were doing. So I would climb into the attic like a little mouse. I knew my mom had an old suitcase of all her 1970s clothes up there that she didn't have the heart to give the Goodwill. So I would bring that down. But before I did, I went up with a ruler just to make sure that when I put everything back, it was exactly how it was put up. Not that my mom or dad would ever go up in that attic to see and notice that something moved around. But there I was, because of course I was petrified. I was scared of being able to come out. Now, also in the 1980s, we had Anita Bryant, who was very vocal about, it was a sin, and that, that we were deviants, and that we needed to be converted. And, there was all this sort of language, and she wasn't even a politician, but she had such a loud voice that it scared, in the South Florida area, it scared a lot of these kids who identified under this LGBTQ plus umbrella. We didn't even have that term, LGBTQ plus, right? So, and so it was one of those things. But something wonderful I discovered in the 1980s was music and fashion and style. And we had Michael Jackson, and we had Prince, and we had Elton John, and they would be always David Bowie and this great clothing. And so I became a musician. So I started to let my hair grow long. And I'm like, look, Mom, Bon Jovi has long hair. They have long hair. I'm a musician. This is what, but there's also that thing in the back of my head. It's like, okay, this looks really feminine. I like this, kind of a thing. So lucky for me, I never really grew facial hair, but there was a point in time, because I'm Chinese. So that comes from my DNA there. Thank God. But there was a time that, I couldn't grow facial, and I wanted to. And why did I want to? Is because I wanted to hide the fact that I was really wanting to be feminine, right? So I wanted to shave my legs. And of course, in middle school, it was always tough to go into the locker room and having to shower with the other boys. And, even when I was shaving my legs, and people would see that I shaved my legs, I'm like, oh, I'm on a swim team after school. That's why I shave my legs to get better. Or there was this one scene, I think it was Kevin Bacon in that movie where he was a cyclist and he was shaving his legs. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a cyclist, or whatever excuse I can make, but I would make all those excuses with this secret thought in the back of my mind that I felt more feminine looking this way, So it was really, a challenge for me to kind of come to terms with who I am. It really, came to a head when, I was in my 20s, where I just really couldn't anymore. I found religion. I became a minister at the early age of like 21, 22. So I thought God was going to fix me. I had people lay hands on top of me. I spoke in tongues. I would fall and tremble, and I would cast out demons from my body, all the feminine demons. And I thought that was going to fix me, but the reality is somewhere deep inside, I didn't think God was not okay with me. I mean, God, I'm more than a body. I'm a spirit. And I knew that God would love me no matter what, because like, if I was born with a deformity of some sort, would God love me less? And so somewhere it was still there. So it wasn't that, it was the church that was trying to mold me into something during that time. And what really opened my eyes to the church was when I was going through my divorce, because now all of a sudden, because I was getting divorced, I was like a pariah. I couldn't be a minister anymore because I was going through a divorce. I couldn't date young Christian women because I was already married and I had children. So that really caused me to soul search. And so I left the church for a while, and I was figuring that out. And my ex-wife decided to, now it was time for me to fight for custody of my kids and going through this divorce. And really, she wanted to use this part of me that felt feminine, because she knew about it. I had to tell her at some point in time, because it was that strong inside of me. And I loved her, and she was the closest person to me. So I figured, I could share that information with her. And I even cross-dressed with my ex-wife. She would let me cross-dress, and we'd go out and we'd do things. And what would end up happening during our divorce is she wanted to expose me. And as a minister, that was going to destroy my career at the time. So it was hard for me to do that. But then at some point in time, I was like, if I were an alcoholic and had trouble with a drink, I probably would have to go to AA and realize that, I'm powerless over this and I need to do something about it. So I realized, if I need to be the best version of me, I need to listen to that internal voice, because it's getting louder and louder, but I'm ignoring it and trying everything to trying to smush it down. And all it was doing was causing distress and depression and a lot of feeling. And it was all superficial on the outside. Even if you saw with a smile on my face, there was still this internal struggle. So what I ended up doing at that point is like, you know what? I'm dealing with it. I need to do this. And I became, my son said it best on Larry King, he may have taken away a father, but in his place, he put a better parent. And that's exactly what I decided to be, and so I transitioned in my mid-20s. I was 25 when I started, 1995, back when we were hearing stories about Brendan Tina being killed because she came out, and Gwen Arajo, who was killed also because some boys discovered. So during the time when the trans community was in the limelight because they were being killed and murdered and bullied, I decided to come out. Go figure. And here I am today, 20 some odd years later, and, really, trying to make a difference in the world just by being me. Because you know what? You can only be you because everyone else is taken. There you go. Oscar Wilde.
Right. I can see so many similarities with your story and with my own personal one. And I would, like, instead of Merv Griffin, I would say what was that other guy? Phil Donahue.
Phil Donahue, yeah, he used to have a lot of them on his
He used
show.
to have like
Even Jerry Springer had them. Before Oprah decided to do anything, they had them on those shows. Jerry Springer, Geraldo Rivera, even Maury Povich. They were there.
Povich, I was on Maury Povich.
Yes, you were on Maury. I remember that. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but
I was on Ricki Lake.
Phil Donahue had one episode that really stuck with me, and I think we're about the same age because I was like 8. And I remember it was summertime. I was a latchkey kid at summer. Parents had me at home. And basically, I was like watching what is it, that television daytime shows and soap operas and The Love Boat and all of it, right? And
and I was always looking on any TV show. I was looking for representation. The only representation we had was like Bosom Buddy,
Island. Had an episode, Bosom Buddies.
So both of you grew up in a very religious household.
Yeah.
How did that play out in trying to find acceptance for who you are? Because I know that I was raised Jehovah's Witness. I know that's played a major role in my self-hatred, shame, having a lot of shame, battling back and forth with detransition, retransitioning, trying to make peace until finally I said, you know what, I have to let go of this Christian God totally, because I can't believe that there is a God that would like condemn us to hell for something that we have no control over. So I'm more spiritual now, and I'm more at peace with that and understanding that
there's something to be said about that Buddhist philosophy, really that comes from self. You can, I can't give you peace. I can't just give it to you. Even if you have to find that within yourself. And this is where I love the serenity prayer. I always go back. My dad, if there's one thing that he really nailed down with me, was that serenity prayer. My dad wasn't an alcoholic. He wasn't, like one of these, dealing with. It was the serenity prayer he thought was so powerful. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. As a kid, I was like, what the heck does that mean? I have no clue, right? So the wisdom to know the difference between what? Realizing that I have no control over this out here. What I have control over is this right here, how I react, how I decide to move forward from things. Because if somebody wants to come up, let's just say somebody wants to come and misgender me all the time, just call me him. Not, let's say they found out I was transgender. They just wanted to make me feel bad by using the wrong pronouns and referring me to male, things. Go for it. Do it. Why? Because I know who I am. So whether you choose to tell, I found that peace within myself. So go ahead. I met with one of my former, very, very close friend. He was a fellow pastor. We produced a music album together, and we were in line at Walmart. This happened a couple years ago. And my son goes to me, oh my God, isn't that so-and-so that you did the album with? And I'm like, oh my God, that is him. So I decided after checking out, I'd approach him, right? Hi, brother, how you doing? Remember me? And he's looking at me with like this puzzled face, like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm JC, remember, And he's like, oh, yes, brother. Hi, it's great to see you, brother. And it was always brother, and he and him. And then at some point, he's like, listen, brother, that you're wrong with God by what you did. And I will always see you as a man, and God made you a man. And that kind of language. And I'm like, that's fine. Okay. I understand this. God made me who I am today. This is why I am who I am. So, but if you want to see me as a man, that's okay. I love you, brother. I'm so glad that I got to see you here today. Yeah. I was not going to let it be fuel to blow something up, because I can go say, God loves me just the way I am. The bottom line is that he has his faith and his own belief, and I can't convince him. God grant me the serenity. I cannot change this man's beliefs, but I can decide how I'm going to respond back to him. And I decided I was going to come from a place of love and not allow whatever language he wanted to use with me to make me feel less than, because the only person who can make me feel less than is me. So,
exactly. You have all the control.
That's what it is. So exactly, but
meditation is something that we've been doing a lot. And it's very helpful because it brings you into mindfulness. It brings you into the now, forgetting about the past. Tomorrow's not here yet. So all we have is this moment in time, and learning how to be in that energy field while you're meditating is very healing and allows you to connect with your higher self, which I believe is us in another dimension being guided. I don't like the word God anymore, because that just brings back a lot of like really awful, shameful feelings. And I believe that the force that created us is neither a man or a woman, right? It's got its energy and its best, and we're all we're fragments of that energy. And we're here to grow and work through our challenges.
If you want to look at nature itself, nature is so much filled with ambiguous, gender is not black and white in nature. Why would it be so black and white with us? And if God created us who we are, then why wouldn't God create this other variant of us as well? Right? Because this is something that exists within ourselves. It's not like me, for example. It wasn't that my parents were giving me the messages and telling me to be a certain way. It wasn't that, it was just something internal, and it's interesting to find out. My mom discovered many years later that the father she grew up with, that she thought was, her biological father, was not. And apparently she had another man who was her father. And she didn't know how to reconcile that thought, but she knew, the man who raised her was always going to be her father, regardless, But then there was this other curiosity. It's like, okay, my biology is this other person. So we went to go visit him in Cuba. This was maybe 10 years ago. And he's sitting there telling us this story. And he goes to my mom, do you know that my grandson is transgender also? And my mom looks at me and goes, this is my father. How's it possible that there's another transgender person that is his grandson and you're transgender? It's like there's like some sort of connection. So maybe DNA is so complex. We're only just starting to uncover the secrets of DNA. Who's to say that there's not something coded in there? Yeah. And listen, we are in an overpopulated planet, and so what's going to end up happening is, as we discover, maybe this is nature's way or God's way of like controlling our population. I don't know. I'm just an idiot, but I know that today exists and today is real. Tomorrow's not promised. Yesterday's gone. All I can do is be who I am today, have faith in tomorrow, and move forward and live my best life in the moment, planning for a future that I want my own children and grandchildren to live in. So,
what's really fascinating to me is that you were able to keep your family intact, that you were able to stay in connection with your children. And that's something that I've always kind of like in the back of my head, I've always been like, wow, if Jessica Lamb could do it, maybe it's still possible for me, because I lost mine.
Yeah.
But I realize how religious indoctrination, how sinister it can be, especially, and I'm not here to blame anyone because everybody chooses. Most of my children are now adults, so they have had every opportunity to, to be able to write or express themselves, but they've chosen to not respond or not be in contact and stuff. And, people like me, as opposed to your situation, I'm painted as the one that abandoned them, the one that left them, and
but you're still there. Like, all they need to do is reach out.
I was still here. And I recently had a conversation with one of my boys, and it was just one of those things where it's just this, this set in concrete way of thinking that I'm not ever going to accept you. I don't want anything. I don't want to have another mother, and it's like, I don't want to be that, but it ends up that religious dogmatic approach, the people that are on Twitter that love to just, throw those words out at people and really try to discredit us as humans. And, it's something that it's just like so common among.
So all you really can do is be that change you want to see. Just because they're going to be that way towards you, that's not really anything you have control over. The thing is, though, you can't change the past, right? So, they were raised a certain way with this sort of beliefs. And so how could you not expect them to have the same beliefs today? This is how you raise them to be,
Exactly.
But you can still continue to love them. You can still continue to be there. You can still continue to reach out, whether they want to or not. You don't know if grandchildren will come into the picture and say, you know what? you're beautiful the way you are. I would love to get reconciled with you. I don't know why my family, you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, right? The difference in my story is the fact that I came out to my children when they were young. They were 5, 6, 7 years old when I came out to them. I never lied to them about me. I raised them with this idea that, listen, as long as you do no harm to others or to yourself, then, you accept people for what they say they are. When somebody tells you who they are, believe them,
Right.
if people who are bad, they're going to show you they're bad in one way, shape, way or another. So stay away,
Right.
but if they're good, there's no, so this is the sort of philosophy. It's not that my family was okay with me. I come from a family of Republicans, and so I don't believe in, and not that I'm a Democrat either, I'm an independent, but that they even when there's laws and stuff that are being passed that are against me, and they can have whatever they want to believe in. The bottom line is that there's a love that exists there, and I decided to live by that example. Whether you love me or not, I'm going to continue to love you. I'm still going to be here. All you need to do is pick up that phone. I'm not going to waver, because this is all superficial. This is just how I'm presenting to the world, because in here, I'm still that same person. I'm still the brother you were raised to. I don't let the language bother me. When my kids were like, well, I don't think I'm okay to call you mom. Please don't call me mom. I'm your dad. If you want to call me daddy, fine. And in public, they'd call me daddy, and people be like, oh, how cute, that kid just call you daddy. Oh, my kids go to my ex-husband's house and they come and call me daddy too. I don't correct them. So, but you know why? Because I don't make it a big deal. If I made it a big deal, then people would see it as a big deal, and then it'd become a problem. So I just live my life, and it took time for my family to sort of reconcile this with themselves, and learn how to be with me. My mom said to me at the very beginning of my transition, well, then I don't want to see you wearing makeup or girl clothes, because I'm not comfortable with that. She had to mourn the loss of her son for a long time. Maybe 2 years had passed, and my brother's getting married, and she wants to buy me a dress for his wedding. And I'm like, awesome, Mom. I just don't feel comfortable wearing a dress. So that's okay. I'll find me a nice pantsuit, kind of a situation. So, but it takes time. And, I always say that, how long did it take you to get to where you are? 30 years, 20 years, 50 years, whatever that might look like for you. That's how long it took you to get there. It might take them just as long to get there, because it took you that long. So let them. But love is love. And if love's, and anything shorter than that time is unconditional love. And it might take a while for them to find that. I had this one kid that used to be my children's bully back in school. So back in the early 2000s, my kids were in middle school, and they were pegged as transgender, gay kids. My kids are heterosexual, cisgendered young men. And, all of a sudden now they were part of this thing, because there was a rumor going around, because they found out I was transgender. Somebody found my website, because I have a website, because I educate. And so they were doing this, and my kids were put into that category. My son was having a panic attack in the counselor's office. I had to come in. I had to deal with it. They started a support group, and come to find out that the kid spreading all the rumors was transgender themselves, going through an issue at home that they had no control over. Dad was shaving his head in the middle of the night when he'd sleep. He would strap him down in his bed, and he would shave his head, because he didn't want his son to have long hair. And this kid was traumatized. They came to discover. So, here's this kid coming from a family. I found out later, that at the age of 18, Dad packed up his bags, put it at the door, and says, you are no longer my responsibility. You can leave now. So, and this kid left, surfing on couches between friends, got a license in cosmetology, and, and started living her true, authentic identity. Now, flash forward 5 years later, I was doing a support group at the Yes Institute, and in comes this kid. Oh my God, Jessica, do you remember me? I went to school with your sons. And I'm like, oh my God, how awesome to see you. I haven't seen you in such a long time. And here's the story. Because, my dad packed up my stuff at 18, kicked me out. I was living on the sofas of friends and such, until I finally got a job working as a hairstylist. And one day, just 3 weeks ago at that time, she told me 3 weeks ago, I was in line to go see a movie. And do you know who walked up to me? Who? My dad. He came to me and recognized me somehow, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, I've missed you so long. You've been missing. I've been worried about you. And I realized that I'd much rather have my kid in my life than not have my kid in my life. And you being gone for, those 4 years really made him, come to terms with this idea. Okay, well, I'm not okay with you still, but I want my kid back. And so they were able to reconcile. What a beautiful story. But it took him that long after the child was gone. You know what I mean? So you have to give the opportunity for your loved ones and your friends to be able to come around. And it might take time. And that's where your love is being put to the test. That's how
and sometimes it never happens.
Correct.
Yeah, but as long as you make peace,
you
I
have
think that's the
planted
most.
Those seeds is all you can do. Planted those seeds because maybe it's not going to be with you. Maybe it's going to be somebody in future generations that you don't even know yet.
You mentioned something earlier regarding the fact that you knew from a very young age that there was no internet, because right now they're blaming, that people are grooming children and they're being taught certain things in school as if, kids can't think for themselves and everybody's got to put stuff in their head. And we know that happens sometimes, but what do you think about all this gossiping and all these things that's going on that are blaming the trans community, they're blaming the schools, they're blaming everybody, even the medical system. I guess doctors go into people's houses.
It's really unfortunate to hear
and
what's
say,
happening.
I'm going to make you a tranny now. Doctors don't do that. What's your opinion on all this like blame game and people are being turned into transsexuals? Like we have this wand.
It's all about fear. It's really a place of fear that they're coming from. The bullies of these young kids are their own parents in some cases, and it's really difficult and really hard. The unfortunate part of things is that it's going to take, statistics have been getting better on suicide rates, and they were doing that throughout the last 10 years. They were getting better. Still not great. We went from like a 48%, suicide rate of teens, before they hit 20 to somewhere around 42%. We moved the needle, right? So we moved the needle. And the unfortunate part is that needle's going to have to go back up again before somebody starts paying attention again, right? So, we've become so complicit, with these things. And it's really all about, I hate talking about politics, but it has a lot to do with political agenda and using fear to get your vote. We're going to convert your kid and they're going to convert your kid. And they're creating that fear so that, no, you're not going to convert my kid. I raised my kids a certain way and I have these beliefs and this is wrong. And then it creates that needle going plop, plop. So you have all this separation in between and you have us versus them all over. And what happens with us versus them when everybody's right? This is all that's happening, is that we're going like this. I'm right. No, I'm right. And we're just fighting. We're fighting. And this is it until one person, opens up their hand and then just sort of wraps around it. And, so you're fighting, but it's just one way over here. I'm not going to appease that. And not until these people open their hands do we see that. Now, maybe we'll see a heart, right? Or maybe we'll see, them clapping and applauding each other. Or maybe we'll see this happen. And this is when our world will, maybe it takes some great alien race to come to the, planet Earth to make us feel so small and go, wait a minute, this is stupid. There's greater things out there to deal with, and make us come together as one. But, all this that we're hearing about, we're going to convert your kids. It's really fear tactics, and it's about misunderstandings and not really understanding what it means. It's miseducation is what I'm trying to say. There's not enough education out there. And even the education we're trying to provide out there, they don't want to believe because it doesn't fit with their agenda.
But you've been out there with so much of this. I mean, you've been an advocate in the trans community for a very long time, and you've seen how the affirmation model works with regards to gender nonconforming kids, gender questioning kids, what was the word that you used? Gender
diverse. That's the terminology we're using, or gender expansiveness. I've been using the term gender expansiveness for many, many years now. And this is a term that we're using to describe the diversity of gender, because not all kids who, don't have this black or white, vision of what gender is supposed to look like are transgender. Some of them, it's just about gender expression. This is how I want to present to the world. I like the word gender queer, so I'm gender queer. I'm not looking to have surgery. I don't need hormones. I just want to be able to dress or wear my hair the way I like to wear it. You know, this is somebody we would consider more gender diverse or gender expansive. Gender expansive is a term we're using with younger kids to really open it up. We would say transgender umbrella for a long time, but transgender in itself is limiting. And these are people that exist. This is a group of individuals that you know have needs and have, you know, need to work through things. But you know, somebody who may identify as genderqueer may never need to see a therapist or somebody to transition, because that's not the goal for them. The goal is just to feel comfortable in their own skin. So that's why we use now a term like gender expansiveness, because you know it's not so black and white. Like I mentioned earlier, look at nature. It's there's a lot of you know, diversity and expansiveness in there. So you know.
We've had what is it, in the past maybe 5-7 years the condition that it's called ROGD, and I know that a lot of individuals in the trans community never liked that term and didn't want to admit that it existed. Well, now we're seeing detransitioning stepping up from these ROGD group, which were never really trans. They were probably gender diverse, confused kids with neurodivergence. What do you think about that group, and how do you think it all came
Oh,
about?
that is so controversial, you know. Rapid onset gender dysphoria. They're indoctrinating our youth. You know,
Right.
again, coming from fear tactics. I myself, as a transgender woman, have been attacked by my very own community because I speak out and talk about transitioners or retransitioners, if that's what you want to call them. But there's different categories of what a detransitioner or retransitioner might look like. Even the terminology in itself is, you know, controversial. But I understand that people in my own community, okay, meaning that, you know, the transgender community, are afraid of those languages. Why? Because the polar left and the polar right are using it to attack each other with. So by you saying that a detransitioner exists and that, you know, this could happen, you're only justifying, you know, what the other side has been saying the whole time, and it's going to, you know, backfire on you and you know, for, you know, keep you from being your authentic self, because it's a lie. You know, this is why they're detransitioning. No, I mean, listen, people go through, it's not that these individuals never existed. They've been a part of our population. They are not the largest part of the population. In the same way, when you say a transvestite is going to go into the little girl's restroom and violate your daughters, okay? I'm not stupid. I'm not going to say, oh, that doesn't exist. That's not true. But that doesn't define the entire population. You know, just because somebody's got dark skin doesn't mean that, you know, they're ghetto and they're going to hold you up with a gun, you know, or that you need to turn away. It's not, you know, so you can't really judge a person that way, you know. And then one of the reasons religion was an issue for me is like, you know, do not judge others. But that's exactly what many people in these religious institutions are doing, is judging others and, you know, causing self-shame. You know, I'm a sinner and I'm a deviant and I need to find, and the only way I can be good is by somebody else telling me that I'm good, you know. Is that the message we want to tell our little girls and our little boys growing up? You know, imagine the self-esteem issues that can come from all of that, right? So, you know, rapid onset, you know, gender dysphoria, you know, ROGD is really being weaponized right now. You know, is it true that there's some kids like overnight decide, oh, this is cool, right? Because they go to YouTube, there's all the videos. And listen, who wouldn't want to be a part of a group of people that says, you're beautiful just the way you are. You can do whatever you want. You're awesome. You could be part of our group. Oh, look how cool it is that I have a beautiful chest now, you know, or whatever that is. Who wouldn't want to be a part of a group like that, right? So this is why many of us go to church, because we need church. We're being, you know, in our own homes, maybe we're in a bad relationship or something, and God gives us hope and faith. You know, I think that's all sort of tied in, and just sense of belonging to the group, right?
To a tribe. Belonging to a tribe. They don't have a good
belonging to your tribe, exactly. And so for some kids to get it wrong, yeah, you know, it's possible. You know, I'm not going to say that it's not impossible. They could overnight decide that, you know, I'm going to cut my hair short, become a boy. You know, it's possible. It doesn't, you know, how many of us when we were kids fell into whatever fads that were happening at the time, right? And it's kind of, you know, cool to be transgender right now, you know what I mean? Or to be gay or lesbian, because it's in the media. And now we have role models out there. And like, and so But to give it power, like this is the reason that this is all wrong, I think is not wise. I think there's more to it, and this is why the educational piece is so important. We also have to educate therapists and professionals who are working with these kids for whatever reasons, because you listen, they can't just go get hormones because they want to. They can try, you know, they can go to the internet and try to get it, but most of the time they've got to go through a doctor to get it. So we need to educate these doctors, you know, to really, you know, look at that. Some people call that gatekeeping, but, you know, but I think there's lots of things that we can work through with our doctors and therapists that is not just, you know, gender related sort of a situation. We shouldn't be so quick to like prescribe, I think in anything, right? We shouldn't be so quick to prescribe a medication and say, this is going to make you feel better. You know, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's figure out why you're feeling this way.
We're living in a world with quick fixes. Everything you need some change, here's a pill. And it's what these young youth have been raised with. And they don't have a positive role model at home. I noticed a lot of these young ROGD girls or teens, you know, they didn't have a good relationship with their mother. So they idolize their father, and they look at boys, how boys could run freely without a shirt and they have really nice hard bodies. And these girls are very neurodivergent. I'm seeing a lot of the teens nowadays with a lot of neurological impairment. Could it be the internet? Could it be all this fast-paced technological stuff that has compromised our neurological system? And so it's like a perfect storm. So they don't have the role model at home. The mother, they don't see eye to eye with their mother. They see more eye to eye with the father. So they want to be boys. And we notice that the rise in ROGD is with females. So no one's really gone deep and like, where is this problem coming from? You know, because it's not all of them are transgender. That's impossible.
No, and that's why I use terminology like gender expansiveness or gender diverse. As a matter of fact, the next standards of care coming out from WPATH is changing that language to more gender diverse type language. So, you know, we're starting to see this happen in our medical communities and in our educational pieces.
Definitely. So Margaret joins us and she says, go ahead, Enriquez.
The news only reports the worst stories. We've all been programmed and conditioned, doctors included.
Yeah, it's true. Listen, you know, about 10 years ago, I did a conference here in Miami. And I opened this conference. It was and I think, Mark, you came to this conference. It was with the Aqua Foundation. I was on that board. Yes. They brought me on board to, you know, really open up this topic of transgender and how to be more inclusive with this community. So I did a conference and opened it up to the mainstream community to educate on these topic matters, right? And I brought in lots of speakers and panelists and legal experts and doctors, et cetera. And I had one person on my committee who was a doctor, who was the chief. I believe he was the chief of urology over at the hospital that he was at. And he made it his personal mission to knock on every single doctor's doors at the hospital and say, you must go to this conference because this is a community that needs our help. And you're going to see more of them come into your offices, and we need to get educated. Our creed as a doctor is to do no harm, and we need to help these patients so that, you know, they don't cause harm on themselves. And can you believe that this doctor, out of every single door that he would knock on, all he would get was a door slammed in his face? You know, most of them because it was against their religion. Most of them, I don't want the liability of working with this population. Some of them, you know, excuse after excuse on why they weren't going to help this community in the medical profession. And the doctor's like, I don't understand this. If we're doctors and we want to do right, why don't we want to learn about this and open our practices to these people? And even today, 10 years later, we're still seeing a lot of that here, you know. And go to college. They don't have a course on this in your regular colleges. They do. Might be 2 hours long out of, you know, a 4-year, you know, course, you know. And so we're just a footnote in a lot of the you know, so we're not really educating on these things. And as more polarizing as we're getting politically, these things are actually, you know, being forced out and not being allowed to be part of those curriculums.
I think that there has been a real upswing in the last year and a half. Hundreds of bills have been introduced into legislatures across the nation with regards to, you know, anti-trans legislation, you know, the whole trans in sports thing, the whole gender affirming thing, where in the state of Alabama, now they've made gender affirming healthcare illegal in the state. And Michigan is actually considering a vote as well on a bill that would make it illegal.
Listen, I
and
live in Florida.
punishable.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Florida's just as
Absolutely.
bad. I
Yeah.
have a very good friend who's a doctor, pediatrician, who works with transgender youth, whose hospital has now taken away the funding from his programming, and he's no longer able to work with new patients. He can work with his old patients until they age out, but he's not allowed to take any new transgender patients. What do you think that's going to do, to these kids who are looking for help? And it's not like we're trying to give surgeries to 12-year-olds or anything. Most of the time we're prescribing hormone blockers to allow them that space and time to come to that decision.
But see, these radical right individuals are spreading fear and fear tactics all over the place, lying about how the schools are teaching their children about the LGBT, how everything is being pushed upon them, how doctors are forcing people to transition and pushing blockers and hormones on children. I keep telling them.
It's the same thing back in the 70s and 80s, even further back in time, 1950s, 60s, 70s. That we were saying that the gays were trying to indoctrinate us and make us gay, that somehow it was contagious and we needed to get rid of this contagion. This is the fear tactics that Anita Bryant, through the late 70s and 80s,
and they continue.
And it continues. I sit here now and I'm like, am I back in the 1980s again? Yeah, kind of. Unfortunately, it's scary and it's hard, my mom's always scared when I talk about these things, especially with how it is out there. And the bottom line is, though, if someone wants to come and kill me for being who I am, then make me a martyr. I'm not going to sit idly by and just not, but I want to come from a place of love. Because listen, you are entitled to your own opinion just as much as I'm entitled to mine. If I want to be that example in the world, you want to say to me, okay, well, I don't think the gays have the right to get married or have children or transition. Okay, I believe that's what you feel and what you believe, but this is what I believe. So, I would want you to treat me with the same respect as I would treat you, right? So I'm not here to indoctrinate you. I'm not here to change your mind about anything. I'm just asking to let me live. Let me be in peace. Let me be a part of the society. Let me contribute, in my own ways. Because something, if I come to terms with the sense of who am I, just like any human in this planet, once you figure out who you are, you become a better human that contributes back to this society. And so why not allow a person to discover that about themselves so they can be better contributors, instead of having to go like this and fight each other all the time. So someone has to yield so that the other one realizes, well, I keep hitting this wall. It's not going anywhere right now, until we can get to a place like this. Before we get there, this is what needs to happen.
I think there's been a real fevered intensity that the right has really gone overboard with trying to, and I think it's because it's an election year, just like the bathroom bills in 2016, the gender affirming care now, that's become the big thing. Matt Walsh just came out in June.
Well, politically speaking, that bathroom bill's been around forever. They've not been able to really win over the bathroom bill. It wasn't until we started to talk about families and children that they started to strike a nerve. So since that's what's winning right now for them, this topic, this is where they're going to hit it. I was just watching a political ad on TV for Mark Rubio, who said something along the lines, and they're trying to convert your boys into girls. Yeah. And I'm like, who is?
Who's they?
Exactly. I'm here to protect your families. And listen, if I wasn't really paying attention, I want to protect my family too. So if I wasn't paying attention, I might vote for him. But this is why it's so important for everybody to go out. And fortunately for us, currently, we live in a nation where we can vote for things and that we can pick our leaders and change our laws. Listen, they changed. They didn't like the abortion law, so they changed it. And so now women are not allowed to have abortions, and so, but we also can go back and say, well, that's not right, and change it back. Right. So that's why it's important for us to do our homework. So when we go to the polls, listen, when I go to the polls, I make sure I know who I'm voting for. Now that we do have this thing called the internet, I go to look to see what these candidates have done and such. So yeah, it was just reversing Roe v. Wade was just the beginning. You watch it, because Oberfeld's next.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was just curious because Matt Walsh came out with a leaked video from Vanderbilt Healthcare, which basically was then brought out by Tucker Carlson at Fox News, and they posted the pictures of the doctors and the surgeons and the medical people. And, you know, there was all kinds of chatter on, like, you know, these right-wing sites and stuff about killing doctors and everything. And it was just really dangerous. But the reality, though, that they were exposing was that these clinics are actually looking at transitioning children as a profit-making venture, right? They were saying a phalloplasty clinic is making all of its money off of phalloplasties.
Because they're expensive.
What are your
the bottom
thoughts?
to say that doesn't exist would be ignorant of me to say that there's
Exactly.
bad stuff out there. Yes, but this is again where education is important, which is why we need to look into this and you know, and work on this. It's not to alienate an entire population. Just because 2 black people, you know, cause a riot doesn't mean that all black people are going to cause a riot. You know what I mean? Just because 2 Latinas, you know, are gay doesn't mean that, you know, everybody else is going to become. You know what I'm saying? It's like where this is the division that we feel, you know, here in this country when we should be learning to coexist with one another. Listen, it's not my place to tell you what to believe in. You're going to figure that out. You're going to do what's right for you. You know, I can tell you my own beliefs. If you agree with it, by all means, you know, you can adopt my same beliefs, right? You know, as long as what you believe in doesn't harm you or others. Listen, if I choose to have surgeries on myself, that's on me. That doesn't affect you. That affects me, you know, and this is all superficial, right? You know, I took hormones to get breasts. You know, I had, you know, gender reassignment surgery. I chose those things to do only because I wanted to fit in a bikini better. So, you know, it wasn't that putting a vagina on me was going to turn me magically into a woman. No, that's here. This is what I know. This is all outside of my body. This is the way I like to present. This is the way I like to look. Makes me feel good. And what's wrong with that? You know,
And do you think that the reason that things have gotten out of kilter is because there's been this push to recognize transgender women as natal women, whereas maybe in the past transsexual women knew their limitations, that they were born biologically male and that they would never be able to change their sex, and they were okay with that. I mean, how do you feel? Has it changed in the years that you've transitioned? Do you have a different thought about that now?
it goes back to the fundamental existential question of who am I? You know, the way we answer that question changes with age. You know, I could have told you the most important thing to me at one time was to become a woman because I didn't see anything else until I got there. And then that voice was quieted. And I was like, okay, there's more that I need to explore here, you know? And so that was part of my journey. We all have our journey in life and how we go. Hopefully you make good decisions in your life and your journey is a fruitful one and a good one. But even if it wasn't, you know, listen, one of my favorite stories to share is this. It was a dream that I had many years ago. I met up with an old high school friend of mine. We were conversing over the phone. She and I used to go, you know, buy tickets at Ticketmaster when we used to be able to camp out in front of a Ticketmaster to buy concert tickets, right? Remember, we were going to go Van Halen. We had to pitch up a tent so he could be the first in line to get front row. So in my dream, you know, I was dreaming that she and I were like camped out to go buy some concert tickets for a concert. We got there and there's Jessica, me right now, the way I look, with my old high school friend buying tickets for a concert. This is, of course, a dream. This is not real, you know, but it sure felt real when I was dreaming it. And as we're walking out of the shopping center where we were at the Ticketmaster and we're coming down this corridor, somehow magically I was whisked away into the past. She and I went into the past, and over on the horizon, there was a band performing up on a stage. So she and I look at each other and go, wow, they sound really good. Let's go check them out. And so we'd go over to the stage, and there on the stage, oh my God, was Jesus Lamb, me, my former self, JC, up on the stage performing with my band. And I'm looking, here's Miss Jessica looking at me, and as a young kid up on the stage, thinking to myself, gosh, I was an attractive young man. I almost felt like it was my son up on that stage, and thinking to myself, what a handsome young man. And I knew, of course, being Jessica, the older and wiser Jessica, realizing that I know what I'm struggling with right now. I may know right now, I'm looking at this person, very talented, very, very vivacious and whatever. I saw everything there, right? And then I was like, but inside I feel ugly. I don't like what I see in the mirror. I think nobody loves me, that I'm lonely. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I can go back and change time. And so after the concert, I decided to approach my younger 17-year-old self. Here I am, Jessica, in my 30s or 40s, when I was having this dream. And I was like, I am going to share all the secrets of the universe to my younger self, so I don't have to struggle. Because look, this is you 20, 30 years from now. It's going to be okay. You can do this. And don't date this person because they're going to cause you heartbreak, but do date this person because they're going to give you some kids, and I was just ready to just open that curtain of life, to my 17-year-old self. But then in that moment, I had that dun, 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 that Back to the Future moment, right? So, and I was like, Doc Brown, if I do this, I'll cease to exist, and all the space-time continuum would unravel, right? So what a fantastic dream this was. And so here I am, I realized to myself, okay, I can't really say that. I need the struggle. I need to figure this out on my own. So what can I do so I don't change time so much? I know what I need in this moment. I need a hug. I need to know it's going to be okay, because I was lonely and I needed somebody. So I decided 40-year-old self, hug 17-year-old self. And there I am coming around my 17-year-old self, JC. And I go, honey, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. And in that moment, I turned into my 17-year-old self and was like, who the fuck is this lady, and what the hell does she know about my life? Which made me realize I wasn't ready to hear it anyway. I had to go through it. So, and that's the thing.
It's a beautiful story.
It's so important that you said that. I look at the transitioners, and they're all angry and bitter and, regretful and just want to stop, these medical transition for everyone.
Most are.
And, I think to myself, you needed to go through, like I needed to go through what I went through to be able to deal. And as painful as it was, these painful events help us grow. Pain is our biggest teacher. And we can't make things better. Things are because they are the way they are, and you couldn't change them because you can't. Things will be how they're going to be. Simple as that. And we have to realize that when we try to shelter people, these individuals that are fighting to protect children and to protect all sorts of stuff. And it's like, you can't protect anybody. People have to go through their own lessons in life to learn and grow spiritually.
That's right. And when you allow the opportunity for people to do that, I like to believe that they'll become better people in the end, So it's not an easy world that we live in. We are just animals on this planet learning to survive and figure things out on our own, and so that's really what we need to try to do. If we can become the best versions of ourselves, we would be better humans on this planet. And who am I to tell you what's right or wrong? I can tell you what's right or wrong for me. You can decide if it's the same for you. But we should be able to learn to coexist and respect one another. If I want respect, then I need to be able to respect you too. Because if I don't, you're not even going to listen to me. You are not going to pay attention. I was doing a panel one day at St. Thomas University here in South Florida, and there was a young pastora who walked up to me after my presentation and said to me, Jessica, you're a lovely person, and you seem to really have a grasp on things in your life, but I must tell you right now that the path you're on is a path of damnation, and you're going to hell for being who you are. What could I do in that moment? Tell her that God loves me just the way I am? No, because that's not what she believes. All I can say to her was, thank you so much for sharing that information with me, because I know it must have taken courage for you to walk up to me and say that to me. That's fine. I might be damned and I might be going to hell for being who I am. Do you know something? That's my problem with God. So let me deal with it. We don't have to coexist in this hatred on each other. I respect what you're saying. I hope that one day you can respect how I feel. And if you don't, that's okay. That's not going to change who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But history shows us that the conquistadors, I mean, the whole Christian crusade has been doing that since Christianity's inception in the beginning of their religion. They try to convert everybody and tell everybody how much of a sinner they are, and they get into your head. And if you have grown up with shame and have all sorts of issue, they got you. They really do, and then they plant that seed of shame, resentfulness, guilt, and all that does is hurt people. And they don't realize that they're just hurting people. They think they're helping us, but in the end, they're hurting us because
can't we learn from history? We are doomed to repeat all the same mistakes we have made over and over again. Maybe this is some sort of karmic way of us trying to evolve. And this is maybe why no other creatures from other planets in the universe have decided to come visit us, because we've got a lot. We're this little. We're like not even that little. We're even little and littler than that. We're just microbes in the grand scheme of the world and the universe, so why do we seem that we're so big? Why do we pretend we're so big? It's like that little ant trying to, be that big thing, that's the thing about ants is you don't see a single ant able to move a mountain. It takes a swarm of them to move it,
We haven't learned that.
No, we haven't learned that. And right now we're living in a world that's so divided, and it's unfortunate. And it's a lot here in the United States. I see other countries who really open their arms to our communities, who do right in their legislations and in their laws, so it's not the entire world that's against us, and a lot of it just has to do here. The United States is a baby compared to other, cultures and religions out there. So we're still learning and we're still going through things. So, I have enough compassion, to be able to say that. It is unfortunate, all these laws and things that are being imposed upon us. But this is, we do still live in a country where we can vote. So make that vote matter. Vote for the people that you feel are going to support your cause and who are going to, make a world a better place. People like to say, choose the lesser of two evils. Well, okay, so choose the lesser of two evils. So.
I think also that there's really a lot to glean from you explaining that this is a journey. This is a journey of becoming you, and you evolves over a time, and it can evolve into different personalities at any given time as well. And that's not a bad thing, to shed a personality. We've been watching and listening to Joe Dispenza talking about things, and it's like he's like, you literally have to create a new person if you want to change habits, because that old person is attached to those old beliefs. That old person is attached to those old ways of thinking, to that sickness possibly as well. You can alleviate that. And that's the beauty of being able to be human, is being able to change.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Our journeys are just so amazing. As a trans woman, as a trans man, we have been able to experience life on both sides.
Isn't that amazing? Right. And this is why the Native American culture celebrated the two-spirited individual, or the person who has walked both paths, because you've got a wealth of knowledge that other people don't have, having lived both experiences, right? So how special is that? And
they
yet
fear
we take
us.
that way. So that's right. There's fear. A lot of this is exactly that, coming from a place of fear. We are always in the process of becoming. My what I like to share, especially when working with kids and youth who are going through this, that it's okay to be who you are, just as you are, exactly as you are now. We are always in the process of becoming hopefully the best versions of ourselves. And the only way we're gonna get there is by trying new things and by moving forward. Sometimes it's taking 2 steps back to see some perspective so that you can move forward again, right? So learning from past mistakes and learning, how to move forward and being true to what you feel inside that's authentic for you. And that's part of nature. That's part of who we are. We have evolved as a human species because we've been able to look within our minds to discover new things and new sciences and new technologies. This all comes from humankind, from allowing themselves to open their minds to other possibilities. Because if we still lived in the 1500s, where we were ruled by a belief of gods, not just one but multiple gods, right? And lived in fear, we would not see life progress to where we are today. So
I think it's an evolution of the
yeah,
species, what's taking place right now.
absolutely.
That's why we're questioning our gender. We want more. We're expanding and we're growing. I wanted to ask you, Jesse, you said that you do some education in school systems and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They have this notion that kids are being indoctrinated and this don't say gay bill thing, or whatever the bill is called in the state of Florida, because parents are fearful that their kids are being magically converted into either lesbian, gays, or trans. Tell us actually what is going on, since you're working that.
Well, that bill was so beautifully written to some people, and when you read it, it's like, we're protecting our children from indoctrinating them, and it seemed like a beautiful thought, because it was about family and about not bringing this into kids when they're too young to learn these sort of things. Listen, the bottom line is, it's not in our curriculums. We're not showing a genderbread person that shows on the outside is expression, and on the inside that's who you're attracted. We weren't showing. That was a tool that we would use to educate teachers, therapists, guidance counselors, to help them explain what is the basic fundamental thing, which is 4 components of sexuality. There's your gender marker at birth. Who assigned that for you? Did you pick it? Anybody decide that they could put that on? Who decided it? A medical doctor. And how did the medical doctor figure out? Did they do a DNA test on you? Did they do something to really figure out that gender? Did they ask the baby? Well, the baby can't communicate at that point. So yeah, it's got a penis, it's a boy. It's got a vagina, it's a girl. But there's so much ambiguity between that. There was a time that if the penis was too little, oh, it's a girl, we need to fix that, kind of a thing. And we think that that's we're butchering our children.
Right.
But yes, there's that gender marker at birth that defines us for the rest of our lives. There's also gender expression. This is what we wear and what we express to the world. And, gender expression changes as far as fashion is concerned, because if we lived in the 1800s, men were wearing powdered wigs and high-heeled stockings, and if some man was wearing that today, we'd say it was a drag queen. Somewhere along the way that changed. So there's gender expression, there's gender identity, which is what's deep inside. What I said earlier, that little movie reel that was in my head, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a girl. Yeah, that's that gender identity that's being messaged in my brain. Not that somebody planted it in there. Maybe it's in my DNA, maybe it's in my brain somewhere, because there's actually scientific study that says that a transgender person's brain resembles closer to that of the gender that they identify as. So that hypothalamus is a little different in a transgendered person. It's amazing to see that science. Nobody wants to believe that science, but it's there. It exists. And then there's sexual orientation. This is who I'm attracted to. This is who I want to have sex with. This is who I want to have a relationship with. 4 components. That's what makes a person in their sexual, journey of life. And we teach that through a genderbread person, to make it simple. Because the way I explain it to you, that's like a college level course. And I can simplify it for you by showing you a little figure and say, outside expression, inside heart, who I attracted to, that's the orientation, but gender at birth, that's down here. But really all that tells you is the reproductive role that you will take. If you've got a penis, you're going to be a father. If you have a vagina, you're going to be a mother. That's all it means. That's all it means. It's reproduction. It doesn't mean gender. Gender is here. This is what
it's created a lot of outroar, a lot of anger.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can't teach this anymore. I teach with Miami-Dade County Public Schools through Safe Schools South Florida. I'm teaching this, to other teachers and counselors and administration. After my last presentation a couple weeks ago, they called me back a couple hours later. They actually called, my board, director, and said, okay, we're going to cancel the rest of our trainings. We're not doing this anymore. And so I was effectively canceled from doing these trainings again. So, and one of the things that I found out that bothered them the most was at the end of my presentation, I said something along the lines is, I understand that you are limited now by what you're allowed to say to kids and parents, the whole don't say gay situation, or you're going to get sued, or you're going to lose your job. Because yes, now the law says you can lose your job and you can get sued for it. Okay. That when, people tend to not pay attention to all the fine print in that piece of legislation. But that is what effectively happened. And because it passed, we have that happening now in our schools. I was effectively canceled because I said, since they can't come to you, have them come to me. I don't work for the school system. I know parents need support. I am a resource. Use me as a resource since you cannot be that resource for them. They did not like that for me at all. So I was canceled. Now, let's flash forward a couple weeks later, and thankfully we have somebody on the inside who's like, we really need this curriculum. So I was given an opportunity to come back to bring this curriculum, and I didn't use this term. She mentioned it to me, and I'm like, huh, you're right. She said to me a comment like, I don't mean to censor you. And then I sat there and go, but that's what's happening. I mean,
that's what you're doing.
And so I can only teach statistics, factual stuff. I need to basically be a scientist, and I cannot interject, and I cannot make a comment like, you can call me and make me a reason. I need to really pay attention. I cannot show anything that may be remotely seen as risque, a drag queen that's over the top, none of that stuff. So I have to basically go back to my curriculum and figure out a way to kind of be able to make this so that it's palatable. Now, the disclaimer was that anytime during my presentation, they can cut me off. If they feel that my presentation is not what they need, they're going to cut me off.
That sounds like 1984. It
right?
Sounds like Big Brother's watching. You can't.
Listen, let me tell you, I am still grateful. I am grateful. And if that's what they need me to water it down for them, I'm grateful that I have the opportunity and the podium to be able to speak up about this thing, because I think something is better than nothing, and if I'm there and people want to look me up later, they can come and find me. So those who are really, need my resource are going to come to me anyway. So I need to figure out how I'm going to fit into this rule book, because it's better for me not to be canceled, if you will. It's better for me to be a voice there and be able to talk about it, even if I can't bring up certain things. Yeah, they want to clog up everything for everybody, right? So,
yeah. I mean, the guise is protecting children, but the motivation is to dismantle protections for LGBT across the board.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. It starts with that, and then it moves forward to the next thing. Until we're effective together.
They're using children as a shield. That's what I've always said. And with the whole protection scenario, they're actually trying to. It's Cold War.
The bathroom bill wasn't working. The bathroom bill wasn't working. So, but this is, and so this is what's on the front.
Twitter is basically the main public square for conversation that people are using. So right-wing think tanks, left-wing think tanks, they're busy coming up with ways and strategies to get people to vote a certain way. So what's happening with a lot of detransitioners is that I believe right-wing think tanks are getting behind it and strategizing, and utilizing them.
Who better to go after this community but somebody who's in the community?
Exactly.
And that's the most powerful voice. The fact that Caitlyn Jenner is going to stand up and say, you know what, trans girls should not be playing in girl sports.
Yeah.
That's damaging. Now, love her or hate her, Caitlyn is an important person of our community, because if it wasn't for Caitlyn, the thousands and thousands upon people who came out after she did would still be in the closet. She was an icon, a pop icon from our generation that really opened the eyes around our, topic, in the same way that Christine Jorgensen in the 1950s did that, the same way that Renee Richards did in the 1970s, Tula in the 1980s, right? So we all need these people. So, kudos to Caitlyn for being that. But because Caitlyn's political views are aligned to this side, she's taking positions to be part of that community. So
I like to call them trans apologetics, that they're trans. And I used to be that way. And again, it was all the battle.
Spanish word?
Arrepentido. It's like I struggled with it. And I was one of that until I snapped out of it and realized, what am I doing? If something like this passes throughout and we all get affected, do they think they're going to have a special little place for them and they're going to protect
Yeah,
them?
they're
No, they're
gonna
going to
all
go
send us
down.
to Australia, and we're all gonna
Yeah,
live on that island. So that's what
yeah,
they tried to do with the
exactly.
English. That was a penal
Penal
colony
colony.
way back when.
Yeah,
So all our
yeah.
troublemakers were moving over there. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not going to get any special anything. You know, they're going to, oh, thank you for your service, going with the rest of you.
But see, what I've noticed with a lot of these detransitioners is that they felt like being who they are, who they were, supposedly, was not authentic. So they felt like literally like they were faking it for like 8 or 9 years, 2 years, whatever years that they were transitioned.
maybe
And
that's true for them. Listen, I
Right.
know you had your journey and you had your thing to go through. The best I can hope that while you were going through your journey, that you would still be friends with me. That was the best I could hope. Whether you agreed that I was still teaching classes on this, kind of a situation. So I respected you. So I would hope that in the same like you would respect me. At some point, well, okay, you came through your journey, and here we're sitting now in the same, side of looking at this, than before. Sometimes it takes that journey, right? So I had one pastora who was very adamant, was one of these that preached on the radio, on television, behind pulpits. And she would talk about, the heathens that the transgender community was, that the whole gay community was, and that they need to be converted back to Jesus, that they needed Jesus in their heart, and blah, blah, blah. Everything, everything negative that a religious group can possibly say about our community, until God one day graced her with a transgender son. And
There
so
you
one
go.
day the son comes to mom and said, Mom, I'm transgender and I want to become a woman. And whether you like it or not, this is my journey and this is what I'm decided to do. And so mom had to reconcile faith and the love she had for her child.
Yeah.
This was her son. If God created my son, then God must have created my transgender son too. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden she had to battle with her own faith because it was like, okay, wait a minute. And so now she says how God blessed her with a transgender kid because it opened her eyes to how beautiful and diverse life can really be, and that God creates this diversity so that we can learn. And now she apologizes to the trans community, wrote a book about it, and has changed. So we're all part of this journey. The best we can hope is that, one day somebody will realize, until we can empathize with what the other person is feeling, we may never understand it. I talk about, there's so many ways that we could be different overnight. If you were a soldier on the battlefield and stepped on an IUD, well, guess what? Tomorrow your life is going to be so vastly different that I don't wish that for anybody. You're going to, you may not have a leg anymore and have to learn how to walk again. You may have this completely scarred. And do we throw these people away? Or if you did that, you would say, no, that's inhumane. So why would we say it's inhumane for somebody who is going through this struggle, trying to fit into life? Why would we say, so what makes that different? Oh, well, because, it's gender is that one thing that we said we could not change, right?
Right.
Who decided that?
Who created that law?
Nature didn't decide that,
No.
it was our own fear, our own belief systems that created that. So, I think that if we can find compassion and love for that soldier who got wounded in war, why couldn't we find the same thing for a transgender brother or sister?
Exactly. Or just coexist. They don't have to expect us.
Correct. You just have to coexist. Exactly. We would look poorly at the wife who left her husband because he can't function sexually anymore. Why do we celebrate the women who left their partners, right? I was working a party when Caitlyn Jenner came out. Now, I work parties. Most people don't clock me as transgender. So I come in there, I work their parties, I do what I got to do, and I entertain their audiences, right? And so I could overhear the conversation of, oh my God, if that happened with my husband and he decided to transition, I would divorce him right away. And I'm looking and thinking to myself, little do you know who's standing right next to you, having lived this experience. The reality is you won't really know until it actually happens to you. And you may actually have some compassion towards it because I love this person. I can't change this person. All I can do is choose to continue to love this person or not. And if you don't, then that might mean you never loved that person at all. So,
Exactly.
and that's unfortunate, but there's so many other humans and people in this world that we can love and have be part of our tribes. And that's important, you know, because we don't have the blood of our family doesn't mean that we can't have family that doesn't share the same blood.
And that's why I'm grateful for this person, because they have shown me incredible amounts of unconditional love that I thought I was raised to believe in, you know, because I was taught from an early age about the unconditional love of Jesus, you know, and I didn't experience that in my
as a
family.
Christian person, you know, I would think that Jesus would love you just the same, because if you were to look literally in the book of, you know, the New Testament, Jesus came here to spread love. The one commandment, he said, listen, forget the rest of those commandments. You know, that was all oppression. The one you need to live by is love one another. That's it. You know, if you know how to love one another, then you know, so why not live by that, right? So that the true Christian will love you regardless.
I personally think that Jesus was a star walker amongst many of the star travelers that walked among the earth, came to warn us about this religious Yahweh and all these stuff, and they killed him and made him into a religion. I personally, that's what I
you know, that's possible. Listen, 500 years from now, we might think that Harry Potter, you know, is you know, this important mythical figure from our past, right? Or Star Wars, may the force be with you, right? Oh, that's
exactly.
We don't know that. We don't know that. But what I do know is that we've whitewashed Jesus. I mean, if we really want Jesus to be fit, you know, truly what he is, he's actually a person of color, you know, you know, and probably not, you know, the white looking guy that we see, you know, there. Oh my gosh, I just said blasphemy. I'm very sorry. So, you know, but you know, but it's true though, you know, it's all based on, listen, I think the Bible's a wonderful and beautifully written book, and it's been passed down through generations upon generations. It was written by a bunch of men. No woman put their voice in that book, you know. And so, you know, we look at this, and there's some great stories that we can learn some great lessons from, you know, the prodigal son, you know, the love one another, you know, lots of great Psalms and parables that can come out of here that we can use in life. But to take it to be quite literal, you know, well, women should not wear pants. You know, why did we write this in the Bible first off? You know, so if you want to get into some theology and look at the time when that was written, because, you know, that's the one, you know, scripture, because I combed that scripture to see, God, tell me why I'm wrong, you know, and that was the only thing where it was a woman should not wear that pertaineth to a man. And the reason that was written, because women were not allowed to serve in the clergy during that time. And so, you know, women were not allowed to be, you know, men were supposed to be the holier than thou. Talk about a women's movement back then. So, you know, so you have to take that apart and put it into that time and frame of life. But if there's one thing that we can learn from it, is exactly that, right? To love one another. And if I think we did that, we wouldn't hate each other so much.
Exactly.
I think it's important also to understand that we are transsexuals. You know, I mean, people keep telling Mark, for some reason, these feminists feel like they have to educate you on the fact that you weren't born a male.
You're like, you'll never be a man. I know that. I'm a transsexual man. I know my biology, but I walk this life every day as the man.
And they're literally telling
listen, I know that when I transitioned to become a woman, men started opening doors for me. So something must, you know, it's like, so maybe I'd have a clue, right? I don't have a menstrual cycle. I wish I did, but it's not biologically.
No, you don't. You don't want a menstrual cycle.
You know, but you know, it's so funny. Like I remember when I was younger, it's like, I want cellulite because that's something that is like women have cellulite, even if it's an ugly thing for women. Now I have cellulite. I'm like, I wish I don't have it anymore. But it was one of those things because women had it. I wanted it. Why? Because I wanted to have that lived experience of a woman, right? So if I could have bore those children myself, I would have. I wish I could have, but that's not biologically possible for me. You know, it may be in the future. We don't know where medical science is going to take us. You never know. So, you know, but it is what it is, right? We just, again, what the most important thing is today, how you live your life right now. If you're doing right by others, if you're a productive member of society, that you're not hurting somebody else, that you respect others. That's really the best that we can hope for right now.
So
And I
one of
hope
the questions, one of the final questions that I have is like, are you happy as a transsexual woman? And if you would do it again, if you could, what advice do you have for those that, are
So thank you for
wanting
asking
to?
that, Mark. That was the same exact question that my father asked me. God rest his soul. I love my dad. You know, he sat me down. It was maybe 4 years into my transition. We're sitting in Latin America, and my dad, the proud Cuban man who, when I was 17 years old, all I wanted him was to tell me, I love you and I'm proud of you, who would never say that to me because he would say, well, if I go to work every day and I come home for dinner, I'm showing you that I love you. So I don't need to tell you that I love you, right? My dad, who grew up with Bruce Lee philosophy that, when water gets put into the cup, it becomes the cup, right? This is my dad, right? Cuban man. You mix Ricky Ricardo and Bruce Lee. That was my father, And so he sat me down after I had transitioned and said to me the same question you just asked me, Mark. And do you know what I said to my dad? Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm not. Just depends on the day and what's happening in my life. But then I knew what my father was truly asking me in that moment is that if I had peace over the decisions that I have made. And Dad, yes, I do have peace in my heart with those decisions. I realize that those decisions in my life aren't always going to be perfect. There are going to be days that I struggle, but I do know that I'm on the right path in my life. And in that moment, my father says, no, that's okay. You don't need to go any further. I want to tell you that I love you and I'm proud of you. And those words
Wow.
that day meant everything to me, and
Sure.
so much so that when my father passed away, and he passed away very young, he wasn't even 60, and we weren't expecting it. We found his body here in his home, and he was gone. From one day he was here, and the next day he was gone. And we put together a funeral for him, and we opened it up to all his, he worked for UPS. We opened it up to his Teamsters, and we just expected, because this was sudden. We didn't have time to plan anything. My siblings and I, did a wake, and we were expecting, just immediate family to show up, maybe a couple of close friends that we had reached out to. But the word got out, and over 100 people showed up to his wake. And I'm looking around, realizing the lives that my father touched in his life, that they came to pay their respects to the family. We couldn't have an open casket because unfortunately he had deteriorated. His body had been, in his bed for over 3 days, and and that was unfortunate. But what ends up happening is a woman walks up to me out of these, lots of the people show up there, and a woman walks up. And if I knew what a lesbian looked like, she was probably a lesbian. So she worked with my dad at UPS, and she walks up to me and goes, "You're the oldest, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." And she's like, "I'm very sorry for your loss. Your dad was a great guy, and I used to work with him 30 years working with him at UPS." And I'm looking at this woman, I'm going, "My goodness, who the hell are you? Working with my dad for 30 years, and I don't even know who you are." That's what I'm thinking to myself, right? And then she says, "I have to tell you something about your dad. When your dad got divorced from your mother and he started dating, he would ask the women he'd date if they were okay with you being transgender. And if they were not okay, then there's the door. We don't have to see each other again." And I didn't know this about my father, that my father actually was proud of who I was. And I think it came from that conversation when I talked to him at Latin America, and in that moment, I realized sometimes the allies we're looking for in our lives, we don't even know are there, and they exist. So even though, Lena, that you think that your family's all against you, there may be somebody out there in that part of their world that is planting seeds for you that may come into fruition one day. You'll never know that until those fruit come. And even if it doesn't come in your lifetime, it may come in the lifetime of one of your descendants. And so your life matters and your life is important. So the message I have for everyone out there is that you are important. Your life does matter. And even if life doesn't look the way you think it should look like right now, just have faith that tomorrow will come, and that in your journey, you're going to find that peace if you are truly looking for it. Because if you're looking for a superficial version of peace, on your own terms, you're not going to find it. And you have to be able to find that somehow in your journey. So, I didn't know my dad loved me that much that he would actually make that. And I asked my mom, did you know that dad used to say, and my mom would say, yes, I was having a hard time with it. And your dad said to me, this is our kid. We need to love our kid. So
Well, it's the same.
I don't know where my dad got that from, but you know,
Yeah.
it
It
is.
must be a Cuban dad thing, because my dad was okay with me being Mark. My mom still to this day it's not. But my dad said, "You're my son. I love you." You know,
Right.
and it was like he even appeared in one of the little documentary that Ana Gloria appeared with, "Don't Hinder My Gender" or something, and they actually filmed him saying it. So
Yeah.
he was more receptive.
Yeah, I was on another one. I think you might have been on this one too. Comprando mi cuerpo, you know, buying my body. There was like this thing on Spanish TV that I was a part of
Yeah, I
that.
remember there was so many stuff that
Yeah,
we
I've
did.
done
Yeah.
quite a bit of things. The ironic thing is, though, is I don't get called as much, but that's because I'm an older transgender woman. So, you know, I remember it's funny. The Latin community has come a long way.
Mm-hmm.
When they would invite me to these programs, they wanted me to dress like a drag queen. They wanted me to wear high heels and short skirts and beautiful big makeup and stuff. And that wasn't my personality. You know, I always joke around. Yes, I'm an entertainer. Yes, I'm transgender, but no, I'm not a drag queen. So yes, I'm a disc jockey. I'm a children's party entertainer. You know, I'm happy to help you plan an event, you know, or come and educate, you know, your folks in your office on transgender issues. This is why I have Jesse Lamb Enterprises, because I decided that, you know, I think it's important for every person in this world, if they want to be some sort of leader or make something in their life, is to come up with a mission statement for yourself. That mission statement needs to be something that's important to you, something that you're passionate about. It could be whatever, you know, whether it is to create a safe space for someone or to be the best version of yourself, whatever that mission statement is. I can't make it up for you. But what I did decide for myself was that I wanted to make a difference with my life. So I make my difference through music, entertainment, and education. And I'm honored to be part of people's memories at their parties. I'm honored to be able to be an inspiration for them when I'm educating, and honored to be able to plant those seeds. Yes, I was a preacher back when I was in my 20s and I went to seminary. I'm still preaching today, but it's a different gospel that I'm preaching. So.
Yeah, there you go.
We've watched some of your older videos when Jesus was singing and stuff. So,
Yeah.
it's so cute. I mean, I don't know. I grew up in Christian television, you know, watching Spanish Christian television stuff. And my
Well,
parents
I had a Christian. The person who produced my first album was a Christian singer also, Javier Morin Rodriguez. If you know who Javier Morin Rodriguez is.
I don't, but
he's El Puma's nephew. Or
wow.
I don't want to out him in any way. So, but anyhow, but yeah, he was the one that produced my record. Incidentally, he was the one also that planted the seeds that made me end up in Christian church and becoming a pastor. So I was raised mostly, it was a religious home, but in the sense that it was very Catholic. So we would go to, you know, I had to, you know, go do confirmation and all that sort of thing, you know, with at Catholic churches. So that was, you know, typical Cuban family in Catholic church. It's how my upbringing was there. And I later in life discovered some spiritual. What's that?
Yeah. You went Pentecostal or charismatic?
I did go Pentecostal, non-denominational, have you? But you know, yes, I did go Pentecostal at some point, of course, with the speaking of tongues and all that sort of stuff in my 20s.
I grew up with that.
You know, yeah, exactly.
I lost my appetite for all of that. I don't even like the word God. I use the word the universe, source. God to me is just
higher power, whatever that might be. I get it. I totally understand.
It did a lot of damage.
For all I know, you know, I can't tell you for certain that God exists, because nobody can tell you that. That's what faith is all about. This is what you choose to believe in. What I can tell you that is we probably become energy, and I've got science to back that up, because that's how our cars drive today. Our cars drive from the energy of those dinosaurs that lived from way back when. So,
and
you know,
hearts, and our heart is all energy. If you look at when they put the EKG, what does that show?
When I was in the room when my grandmother passed away. In the moment that my aunt told my grandmother and whispered in her ear, "It's okay, go into the light. Your son is waiting for you there," right? She died a year after my father passed away. In that moment, I can feel her energy leave her body. It was very palpable in the room. So that I can tell you really exists. That we become spirits, I don't know, but I do know that we become some sort of energy, and that energy must go back into the earth, into the world, into the universe,
or back
whatever
to
you wanna call
source. Yeah.
it. So,
Back to source.
that's what it is. Our
Yeah,
bodies
yeah.
started from dust and becomes dust when we die, so whether we speed that along by cremating our body and polluting our air, that's, a different story, or we pollute our, whatever that might be. So I actually, if I told my kids, if they could afford it, shoot me into outer space. That's where I want to
There
go.
you go.
So when I've left my body, just shoot me into outer space so I can catch up with my spirit.
Well,
I'm sure that energy is residing within us in these physical vehicles that we call bodies, right now.
I still feel the presence of my father every day. He visits me in my dreams, and it's an amazing, feeling. So it's quite powerful. My dreams, as I shared with you earlier, so they're pretty great.
Yeah.
And I think when we pay attention to those things in our lives, I think we call it God giving us signs, whatever you want to call it. I think that there's markers throughout our lives that are there to be teachers in our lives. We just have to recognize those teachers when they're there.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. So I know that you identify as a lesbian, and I know that there's a lot of lesbians that don't see eye to eye with transsexual females.
True.
How do you feel about that? I mean, how
It's
have
been a
you
tough
handled
dating, mating, and relating. That's what we call it, right? So,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I've had many of trans women interested in dating me. And is it hypocritical of me of saying that I wasn't interested in dating those trans women? I don't know. I wasn't feeling it for whatever reason. Whether there's a heterosexual male brain still stuck up in there, I can't tell you. I just know what I feel. So it was a tough time dating other lesbian women. I once was with one woman, and one thing led to another. We slept together, and the next morning she was like, that was kind of cool. That was kind of great. Does that mean that since you used to be a guy that I'm straight now? I'm like, well, I don't know what kind of sex you were having last night, but I wasn't thinking I was having straight sex with you, So it was really interesting. But I realized it wasn't so much about me, but about her. I have found that when I've dated younger women, they're more open to it. As a matter of fact, I dated this young woman. It's like, wow, it would have been so cool if you would have still had your penis. I would have liked to know what that would have felt like. And I was like, I think maybe I would have too. That might have been kind of fun. And so I'd be like, I can project it energetically, right? It's that fancy rim. So, but interesting, that the younger generation are a little more open with me than women that are my own age. And so that's at least my experience dating in this world. That's not to say that everybody's going to end up being a single woman. Listen, I might be difficult, with a partner that I don't realize, so maybe that's why I don't have a partner. But, not that I would welcome a partner in my life if it came around, but I think it would need to happen organically for me. To see, if I'm not out there looking for it per se anymore. And right now my granddaughter is my number one priority in my life because I'm raising her.
She's growing up beautifully.
She's an amazing soul, beautiful girl. She says to me when she found out that I was transgender, because of course I had to be open, and I didn't use terms transgender, but she said to me, did a witch give you a magic potion to make you into a girl? And I was like, yeah, kind of, sort of. So we called him a doctor. So,
witch doctor. A witch doctor.
Which doctor was it? My endocrinologist, actually. There you go. So, but so it's about priorities. And so I haven't given that part of my life a priority so much anymore. But yeah, it was hard to date lesbian women in my own community. And I think it might have something to do with just, again, back to that question of who am I? For lesbian women growing up in my generation, when we were being attacked, it was hard for them to come out and to be themselves. So it was a battle. It was a struggle. And so to finally get to a place that I am a lesbian woman, hear me roar, that journey for them was powerful. And to introduce transgender into it, it causes a question because of that male, energy that I used to have that I might still have. I'm me. I'm still me. It's funny. I went to, I had my old guitarist from my band called me up once, and he saw a picture of me on classmates.com, my high school picture with my now picture. And he's like, is that an April Fool's joke, JC? That's hilarious that you look just like a girl. I'm like, no, I actually transitioned. Really? I happened to be in Nashville. I went to go visit with them. He's like,
Oh my.
shoot, you really are a girl. You look like a girl, Mike. And then we sat over drinks later that afternoon. And he's like, we're having conversation about our kids. He's like, shut up. And I'm like, what do you mean shut up? Yeah, shut up. I don't want to hear you talk. And then we just sat there in silence as he's staring at me. And I'm like, can I talk now? No. Wait, hold on. And then he was like, there you are. I see you. Okay. Oh man, you're still the same geek you've always been. All right. But it took him a while to get past this, to see me, right? So it was really interesting to see that happen in somebody's eyes. And sometimes that's what it takes, to find something familiar in somebody, and so that you can have a conversation, But yeah, it's been a wild ride for me. So, who knows how many years I have left on this planet. I hope that the stories I share are some that could provide some hope and some sort of inspiration if possible.
Definitely. And people need to put their walls down and stop. I don't know. It's just like this hatred of what they don't know, and women's rights, and women need safe spaces. And, it's like, transsexual women are not going to hurt you. It's like, I don't understand why they have such.
I'm out to convert you and turn you heterosexual, even though I'm a woman now and I don't have a penis anymore. So
I know.
The ironic thing in my life is, I got rid of it to strap one on later. That was something my dad had an issue with. My dad was like, well, you like women.
Why did you get rid of it?
Exactly. I was like, why'd you get rid of it? You had it. It's like, well, the women just didn't like it, the women that I was dating, so I had to get rid of it. Then later I date somebody younger and realize, they didn't care anyway. So it's like, okay.
So you're like,
so I go back to saying, you know what? I did it to fit in a bikini better. But the honest to God truth, though, was that because I had been on hormones for such a long time, my endocrinologist said, listen, although your body is responding well to the hormones, you're on high dosages, and I don't want you going the rest of your life on these high dosages of hormones. So either you have an orchiectomy or you decide what to do, because, we need to figure out how we're going to reduce these hormones. And so the choice was given to me. It's like, well, if I'm going to do an orchiectomy, I might as well just have, the surgery. And so I opted to have the surgery. But, that's when you're ready for it. When it's something that whether I have it or not, it's not going to define me. Then you're ready. Then it's not going to affect your life enough, because some people think that's the solution. No, it's not the solution. It's part of making your life easier and better. And then when you look in the mirror, you don't feel that dysphoria anymore of like, that doesn't look like my body. My body should look differently, because really everything I did was cosmetic. Yes, I took hormones. This is not cosmetic really, because the hormones created it. But still, there's secondary characteristics that happened after I started taking hormones. But, the vagina, it's not a real one. It's one that I created. Oh my gosh, blasphemy if you're another transgender woman who had surgery, right? So, it's a real vagina. No, I mean, it was created to look like one. It can function like one. If I was a heterosexual woman, then I can have sex with it, but it's one of those things that if you decided to grab my DNA and create another Jessica, guess what? You're not going to get a Jessica. You're going to get a Jesus. And that's the bottom line. Whether Jesus that you cloned me from is transgender or not, we'll figure that out. But that's not me anymore, because you know what? You are you, and you're going to be the only you that ever exists in an all time and space continuum. Even if we cloned you, that's another person. That's somebody else. It's not you anymore. That goes to prove and show you how special you are and why your life matters.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for appearing on the show, for sharing your story, for being a great force out there for the LGBTQ community, for being a friend, for understanding, and for just being you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Like I said earlier, Oscar Wilde said it best. You can only be you because everyone else is taken.
That's it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Jessica. We'll catch you guys next Sunday. We love you. But remember to always love yourselves too and each other. Catch you next week. Bye-bye.